Live from the heart of the Blue Ridge, Roanoke, Virginia. It's the Just Bernard Show with host Bernard Alvarez. Join Bernard as he shares topics that reveal the real matrix and empower your human experience, including world liberty, the esoteric, suppressed technologies, spiritual ascension, and human consciousness. Humanity has awakened, and our time has come to realize our full potential. And now, live from the Star City, your host, Bernard Alvarez.
Anyway, so let me tell you a little bit about my guest. I've been looking forward to this guest. We've had scheduling issues since like February, I think, and yesterday my tablet decided to email her like 300 times, I'm sure. But anyway, she is the author of 3 books, and she is also the daughter of famed novelist Paula Fox, the mother of one of my favorite musicians, Courtney Love. She is a couples therapist with more than 30 years of experience. She is certified in transpersonal psychology and imago therapy and is a master teacher in pairs therapy. She lives in Corvallis, Oregon, and offers workshops across the country and is a frequent speaker at Rancho La Puerta and Tecate, Mexico. Without further ado, let me welcome Linda Carroll to the show. Hello, Linda. Welcome.
Hello. Hi. I'm so glad to be here.
Oh, we're so glad to have you, and I'm so glad we were finally able to get this time together.
Good, me too.
So, excuse me, Linda. I love the topic of your new book, Love Cycles. I find that I'm not very good in that department, so hopefully I may actually learn something on today's show. But you having over 30 years experience, I'm sure, has given you a lot of I guess, information as well as content to be able to talk about. What was your inspiration for wanting to write this book based on the 5 essential stages of lasting love?
I think it's 2. There were 2. One is that I, for a long time in my life, in my earlier life at least, I was under the illusion that what love was that initial feeling that we get when we fall in love, and it made a lot of trouble for me. And the other thing is that inspired me is I was on my way to do a class one time, and to lecture at Rancho La Puerta, and I read a magazine on the airplane, and it had one of those love columns in it, which said, "Dear so-and-so, I'm not, my partner's a great friend, a great lover, a great dad, and just wonderful, but I'm not in love with him anymore. What should I do?" And the person who answered said, "Well, it's obvious you should get a divorce." And I was so distressed by that advice, and I went and I gave the talk, and then I said something about it at the talk. And a woman in the audience said, "What upset you the most about that advice?" And I said, "Love is a feeling, and learning to love is a skill set that doesn't have to do with the feeling." It just it fell out of my mouth. I didn't try to think about it. It just came. And afterwards, this woman came up, and she was a book publisher. She said, "You've got a book in there." I said, "No, I've written 2 books. I'm done." She said, "No, you've got a 3rd. Love is a feeling. A long-term relationship, loving is a skill set." She said, "You got to do it." So 5 years later, I did it. And so that was it. But it really, the reason that affected me so much is because in my younger life, I believed that the feeling and the strength of the feeling was absolutely coordinated with the certainty that you should be with somebody. And I felt that feeling for someone when I was 11 years old. And I remained in some kind of obsession with him till I was 38, and went back and found him and thought, what would that would have been a really bad move to have married this guy. And it was interesting because when I saw him all those years later, decades later, after he had remained fixed in my mind, all the things I had been attracted to about him were still happening. But there were other things I saw now that where I could say to myself, boy, you escaped, Linda. So, does that make sense to you, Bernard?
Yeah, it does, and I think that I know for me, I noticed that with love, it's very different, as you said, like in the beginning, but to actually learn to be able to live with someone, to deal with their daily quirks and whatnot, that can really wear down someone's patience. And I'm wondering, do you speak about that as far as the cohabitation
Yes, I do.
aspect?
I do, and I'm not an enlightened person. I'm a person who's very critical, and I get annoyed easily, and I say people are annoying. And when we're in love, we have all of the changes in our brain, and we have these wonderful, yummy chemicals that are keeping us sort of, everything about them is okay. But when the chemicals run out, we've got to work out with a live person. I think a lot of it has to do with how well we attached as kids, what our attachment style was, and if we had healthy attachment modeled. If we saw healthiness, it doesn't always work like this, but it does sometimes. If we saw healthy relationships, and if we had healthy relationships growing up, then it's more likely that when we fall into some sort of trouble, which we will sometimes every day, we know how to get out of it, we know how to repair it, we know how to move on, we know it's not the end. Like this poor woman that wrote the letter. My husband and I have been in a relationship for 40 years. We've been married for 30. And I have fallen in and out of love with him so many times, sometimes on a daily basis. I feel, my feelings for him are they're like the weather. And we have had many winters and many springs, but the feelings are not really what I base a relationship on. They come and they go. And I have to say this other part is that I had to learn a lot about how to select somebody that was appropriate for me. And then I could work with this. I mean, I had been married before. I had been in other relationships with people that it just wasn't going to work. And so all the stuff I teach, it wasn't going to help me. I had to figure out how to find the right person, how to be the right person, and then all of the skills came on board. So, it's not, the feeling is lovely when it's there. Some days are just boring. You go to work, you run out of milk for your latte. It's somebody blocks your partner blocks your car. It's just sort of annoying days. But that doesn't mean the relationship is bad. It just means you're a human in a real life.
And I would feel that perhaps that comes with a level of emotional maturity, perhaps. So do you find that perhaps relationships tend to be healthier as we get older, or as we are more emotionally mature? Because I know 20-year-olds that are emotionally mature. However, it's so easy, it seems, for people to say, "Oh, that's it, I'm done. I can't handle this," or whatnot, when they're still in love with the person.
I think that, it depends what it is. If you have someone who's cheating on you all the time, or who's shaming you all the time, or who's in an affair, there's all kinds of things that are kicking your dog. That's not going to work. But if you've got the right foundation to start with, then you've got to know that there's going to be times where it's hard, and then there's going to be times where it's blah. And for some people, the blah times are the worst. And that's okay. There are things we can do to regenerate it. It's like our sexual relationship. It's free in the beginning. Everything's free. It's what we fall in love, Bernard. That's why it's called falling. We don't have to do anything. We just fall into it, right?
Yeah.
But to be able to keep it going, we need real skills to be able to do that. And if we don't have those skills, the good news is we can learn them. I work with couples all over the country, and I teach those skills in 2 days. I can teach a couple some of the basic two kinds of skills. I can teach them something about each of those skills to help them. Now, it's like having an exercise coach. You know, I can tell you all the exercises you need to do, all the movements, all the lifting, but you've got to do it, or else it doesn't just happen. You've got to do it when you feel like you don't want to. You've got to do it when you feel tired, when you feel sore. And these skills are the same. You practice them, whatever else is going on, you just do it. And then you find that you're in a better place more and more often. And the little place and the places that aren't so good, they're not so big anymore. So I've lived this. And I often say, in fact, one of my clients said, if Linda can do it, if Linda and Tim can do it, anyone can do it. I think I like it that they said that, because we started out very imperfect.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there's nothing better than someone who's actually been through it to become a professional at it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's my real credential.
Absolutely. And you've titled this book Love Cycles. What does love cycles mean, and why is it helpful for us to understand where we're at in relationships?
Well, love cycles really refers to how we go through different stages in our relationships. And they're pretty predictable. That most people that have done a lot of study on relationships, they have come up with these stages in various ways. They talk about them in different ways. Mine are a little unique, but you know they're really, as I say, my work stands on the shoulders of many great teachers. So we talked about the merge. I call that the merge. It's when we are in absolute enchantment. We fall madly in love, and we are enchanted by the other person, and everything they do is enchanting. It doesn't matter what they do. You know, we find a way to make it wonderful. Because what's in control are these incredible changes in our brain chemistry that we have found for people who are in those stages of romantic love. And we're downloaded with dopamine and norepinephrine and all of those yummy chemicals, those addiction chemicals that make us feel good. You know, the feel-good chemicals are alive and well. And what happens is those are programmed to last 3 years. They don't go any, and they have diminishing returns, so that every time you fall in love, that you get the free ride for less and less time. Mm-hmm. And as they start to decrease, and we move into ordinary life with somebody, we suddenly, the things that we fell in love with, sometimes the other side of those things begin to annoy us. We start to see that what we thought was so, I remember my husband was, he was so predictable. I was fascinated because he never set his watch ahead. He only set his watch right on time. And I never knew anybody that didn't set their watch ahead. You know, he was absolutely the most, he was punctual and he was predictable. And then I remember one day I made a suggestion. We had a plan to go somewhere, and I said, let's do something else. And he said, no, this is what we planned. And I suddenly said, I remember this came out. I said, you're so rigid. And he said, you used to love how predictable I was and steady. But all of a sudden now I saw it in a different way. So I think that was, he used to love the way that I would give money to foundations and dogs and, you know, people with one leg and two dogs. And he admired that so much in the beginning. And then we shared a bank account. And then he said, hey, what are you giving all that money away? You know, you're so impulsive. Same quality, different way of seeing it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So at stage 2, power struggle starts. The power struggle begins. And we start to notice the things that are not working well about the other person or with the other person, and we just move back into ordinary life and wonder where the magic's gone. And that's to be expected. And I call that stage 2 doubt and denial, because we're now starting to doubt that maybe this isn't the right person. Maybe this is, maybe I made a mistake. And then we deny that. Oh, no, it has to be the right person. I can't bear to look at it. What's really happening is we're having just human problems, and they're not bad, and they're going to be a gateway to something else if we can work with them. But since we don't know that, we think something's wrong. So that's doubt and denial. And then the third stage is disillusionment, which is like disenchantment. And disenchantment is really what happens. It's the opposite of stage one. Stage one, we see everything right, and we miss all the red flags, and because it feels so good. Stage three, we see everything wrong. It's like we're in another kind of trance. The first trance is a positive trance, and the second trance is a negative trance. And I mean, in that second trance, everything, they can't do anything right. Everything they say becomes proof we're with the wrong person. That's called disillusionment, disenchantment. And then the fourth stage, we decide, and we're locked into some negative, I call them negative loops. We have the same trouble over and over. We usually have one person who's more of a pursuer in a relationship. For example, that's the person that wants to process everything when it happens, who wants to talk about it the minute it happens, and then talk about talking about it. And they're wanting connection all the time. And usually the person, they're with somebody, they choose somebody who is different and who is wanting a lot more solitude. Doesn't want to talk about it as soon as it happens. Says, I'm not ready to. And those seem real sexy at the beginning, but when we get to stage three, those become a whole power struggle in themselves. And that power struggle plays out. The person one pursues and the other one distances. And they're going back and forth with that. So I call those negative loops. I go into that a lot in my Love Cycles book. We have to make a decision. Sometimes there's pretty hard moves that get played out. Sometimes sex either dries up altogether or becomes perfunctory, or there's a lot of resentment because we're closed off, we're protected, we're mad. And that's one of the things that I think nourishes our relationships is sex. And when that stops, then we often have another kind of trouble. Then we have to decide: do we stay together? Do we go into do we stay together and have parallel lives where we're looking out in the same direction, but we're not looking at each other? It's not a bad solution. Some people do that. Do we stay together and just, criticize and torture each other for the rest of our lives? Do we split, or do we do the work? And my thought is, if it's at all possible, if those people are willing, do the work before you leave. Because if you don't, you're going to find yourself in the same kind of relationship down the road, same issues. Because guess what you take with you is yourself. So then when people come into me and they say, well, we've lost the magic, it's not working anymore. I had one man who said, she used to be my hero and now she's not. I've seen some things where she has feet of clay. I said, everyone has feet of clay. It's like you're not going to hold that person on a pedestal forever. Sometimes, and what a powerful thing it is when you really get to love and find out that somebody can love us not because we're perfect, but with all our imperfection. Boy, that's so healing. So the stage 5 is really doing the work. I call that wholehearted love. And in wholehearted love, we know what's going to make it work. We know what's going to make it good. And so we start to practice those things and watch the relationship come alive. Just like a little plant that hasn't had enough water or hasn't had enough good stuff put into it. And we start to do it, and then suddenly there it is. Buds come out and flowers come out, and we realize that we've brought it back to life. We can do that in our relationships a lot of the time.
My goodness, as you're speaking, I can't help but see my love life flash before me.
Yes, there you see.
And the places where I can see where those relationships may have gotten stuck, and I don't think I've ever made it to stage 5, or else I'd still be in it. But or is that true? If you make it to stage 5, is it fair to say that you've kind of made it through?
I think that it is fair to say you have a lot of. Well, you don't make it through. So the first thing is You don't make it through because we leave each other in the end. We start and we end with ourselves.
Ah.
You know, nobody stays together forever. And, I mean, this is just a very painful, sad thing, is that we all leave each other in the end, one way or another. So we don't make it through. And the other thing is that what happens is that we learn that when we learn the skills, and a lot of those skills have to do with managing ourselves, everything opens to us. We've just become more skilled in the art of really loving other people. And when you get older, you know, each stage brings a new challenge. You get to be in your 50s, that's one kind of challenge. Your 60s, worse than my husband and I are 70. There's a whole other kind of challenge when you're 70, you know. It's like, he can't hear very well. I can't believe that. You know, it's like, I can't believe him. I knew him when he was so young. But he says, what? I didn't hear that. And so then that's another kind of problem, you know. You start to, what does that do when you start to lose your hearing, or you don't see so well, or, you know, your body starts to fall apart like an old Ford? Then you have challenges of having to face first getting older issues, and eventually end-of-life issues with each other, or you have parents. I still have parents who are alive who are really falling, you know, down fast. Those all bring up challenges, and so you have new challenges to deal with. What you get is you get the skill that can help you be kinder, more patient, and know more about yourself and how that happens. So how, you know, like, for instance, I had a doctor's appointment this morning, and I'm fine, but I can't stand going to a doctor. When I go to the doctor, I get so afraid. I become like I'm 7. I'm totally illogical. I think they're going to find something terrible and say, you know, it's all over. My blood pressure, which is always good, skyrockets, and he was going with me to see this doctor, and we went to a coffee shop, and I said, we have to go, we're going to be late. And he said, you're making me crazy. And I just was able to put my hand on his arm and say, this is my craziness, honey. I'm so vulnerable. And he was able, after 40 years, it took 40 years, to say, oh gosh, I forget how it is for you, because it's not that way for me. Let's go. And he put his arm around me, and off we went. And it was over. Now, that would have been a 2-week fight at one point. You know, he would have said, why, get off my back, and I would have said, well, you know, you make me more anxious. But we knew something about generosity with each other. I knew my trigger. I'm not reasonable about it, but since it's my gig, I have to go be there at 8:30. It's fair for him to, you know, to give that to me. And so we're able to learn that. Now, that took a long time to learn how to do it. And the number one most important quality in relationships has been found to be generosity. And what I describe is exactly why. Because we have to really learn how to be generous to be able to manage other people who really get into our way, like that example I just gave you. You know, no one was bad, but that could have been because when one person is anxious, their personality changes. And so our personality moves from being open to being closed and protective, and we go into fight or flight, and then we're dealing with a different person than we were in the beginning. So all of this is so good to know because it really helps us manage what happens.
Now, Linda, I have you brought up an issue for me that I know I have, and I've seen it be an issue for many couples, and that's the idea of not getting your partner not doing what you're expecting of them. In other words, let's say that you won an award or something, and your partner just doesn't care, and you're very hurt because they're not meeting your expectations. I guess that's the word.
Yeah.
So, do you talk a little bit about that in the book and how to deal with that?
Yes, I do.
How not to rely on outcomes. Don't cling to outcomes.
Well, you know, we have different ways that we feel nourished, and for some people, admiration and saying, aren't you great? That's really important. They're words people. They like to hear positive things about themselves. For other people, they couldn't care less about that.
Mm-hmm.
They have a practical way of looking at it. Don't tell me you love me. Just bring me a latte every morning. I don't want to hear the words. I don't care how, if I win an award, I really don't care. I don't care if anyone knows. It's like that's not so important to me. But when I get a gushy card, that sends me over into just the happiest place in the world. And my husband's the opposite. He loves me to see what he's done well and acknowledge it, and it's important to him, but he doesn't care about the gushiness. And so for years, I gave him gushiness. And, here's a great example. When we're sick.
Yeah.
We have different needs. When I'm sick, I want a lot of attention. I want a lot of pity. I want a lot of I want my partner to sit on my bed and say, oh, sweetie, you're going to be okay. I know it's horrible that you have this cold and you look like you're really suffering. What can I do? When he gets sick, he wants to be left alone. Bring him some orange juice, some soup, and shut the door. So for years, what would happen? I'd get sick. What would he do? He'd leave me alone. He'd get sick. I'd surround him and make him feel crazy. So we had to have a conversation about that. You're not me. I call that the number one argument is you're not me. You don't like what I like. You don't like big parties. I love big parties, You don't like, I once heard about a rabbi who said he'd marry any two people who wanted to be together unless one of them liked dogs and the other didn't. Because he said that's the only thing he didn't see that people could work out. But we're all different, and we fall in love with someone because they're different, and then we drive them and ourselves crazy trying to make them into who we are. Generosity comes in here. When I win an award, I want you to really notice. I want you to go with me to the award, and I want you to kind of just really appreciate what I did and ask me about it and, talk about it and tell your friends. Or when I win an award, I don't want a big deal made of it. I just want you to say, okay, that's great. Shall we go to dinner? And if I say no, it's not personal. I don't like all the attention. So then we have that's a conversation. And so with generosity, I say, I know what you want. You won that award. I'm going to go with you. I'm really going to shine on you. Or you say you won the award. I know you don't like what I like. How can I support you? That's a conversation people can have. And we have to learn how to have it. But people initially think something's wrong that we should just know. But we don't just know. That's one of the very, very dangerous ideas that we'll just know. I'll know what you need and you know what I need.
The mind reading syndrome, I call it. It's like, you expect me to read your mind? You need to tell me.
That's right. That's exactly right. Exactly right. So,
you mentioned something that you were talking a little bit about liking different things, and I can't help but remember going back into my teens and 20s or whatnot, and wanting to find the things that we had alike with the people I was seeing or dating. Do you like the same kind of music? Do you like the same type of movies? And why that was so important? And is that really important in the long run to a healthy relationship, to like the same of everything?
No, it's important that you have a certain basis where you connect. And if you don't have anything the same, that's not going to, but we fall in love with people again different. Mountain climbers fall in love with knitters. Computer programmers fall in love with tango dancers. And in the beginning, we do all those things happily and willingly. We join in with each other. The computer nerd goes mountain climbing, or the knitter becomes a tango dancer. But then we go back to ourselves. And so we have to have enough of a basis where we connect. We need two things. We need to have enough places where we do connect, where we. I always say with my husband and I are so different. He's a Kiwi, he's a New Zealander, I'm an American. He's from a small town, I'm from a big city. He's a nature person. I grew up in San Francisco. I still think the Four Seasons is a hotel. And when we first got together, he'd take me camping. I thought, oh, this is so sexy. And then I remember about 3 years into it, I thought, I don't like this. Why am I sleeping on the ground? I want a bath. And, he'd go with me to the opera and plays. And so eventually we went back to our ways of being. But I always think about my relationship, that our personalities are so different. We would never come up in Match.com. That our spirits are so aligned. And it's been that way for 40 years. So there's so much that we each love, the other doesn't. But we know we have the best conversations of anyone I've ever been with. So we give each other a long leash. I go off with my girlfriends. He goes off to mountain climbing with our kids. I mean, we have a lot that we do separately, which juices the relationship a lot. So we don't have to do all those things with each other. I have people that I love to do those things with, and so does he. And that's how, but at the beginning it seems like it's so hard to go from that merged groupie state to, to saying, why don't you go do that with your friends because they love it. But we don't have to do everything together. In fact, I think that's killing to a relationship.
Mm-hmm. Now, when it's time to break up, what are some of the signs? And I know that they're not different for everybody. I myself have been in very, I don't want to say hostile, but passionate relationships where we thrived when we were high and low, and just, very passionate. I forgot what somebody called intense. Intense relationship was very well in that particular sign, where for other people, they would think you people are crazy. You need to break up with each other. What would be some of the signs that you and your lover are not compatible for the long term, and maybe perhaps it's time to break up?
I think that one sign is that, first of all, I want to change this and say there really aren't signs in the way you're describing, because people can have terrible periods of alienation and put their relationship together in ways that are unimaginable and new. So I think that the signs that there's trouble, not that you need to break up, because if you're willing to do the work, you don't need to break up. But if there's signs that trouble signs are, if one person's in an affair and not willing to get out of it, if one person is terribly unhappy and the other person is not willing to listen to their unhappiness, to give them any time, to get help if they need it, if there's any kind of abuse, if somebody has an addiction problem and won't get help for it, or gambling, that's an addiction, or is is deeply depressed and won't get help. See, in other words, if you're willing to get help for the problems, so many of them can get fixed. But when someone's not willing, that's very hard to know what you do next. So if you have, sometimes one person is just out of the relationship, they don't, and especially if they've gotten involved with someone else. That is I can see it when I'm working with couples. If somebody, I just had a couple I've been working with, and one of the people, I've been working with them intensely for 3 months, and they both said they wanted it to work, but she was never there. She'd come in her body, but she would not be there. Right. And somewhere into it, I actually did a supervision about them, because they weren't getting anywhere. And my supervisor said, is she in another relationship? And I said, she says she's not, but I think she probably is. Well, it turns out she was. She'd been with this guy a lot of years. They were into having to do some hard work to repair some of the trouble. And she fell in love with some guy at work, and they'd been together for 6 weeks. And she was emailing him and seeing him in between our sessions, because she was getting all those good feelings. And when she finally got confronted about it, she just burst into tears, and she said, well, I think it's just that I've been with the wrong person, and now I found the right person. And I just thought, oh, poor baby, it's all going to happen again. If you don't at least finish the work with the person you're with. I'm not really answering your question. It's a complicated question about what is the time. Because I've seen people in the worst situations you ever saw in their relationships, and they both have said, we want this to work. And my thing is, I believe in 35 years, this has always proved true. I've never worked with two people who wanted it to work where we couldn't figure it out. And then I've been with people who had so much wrong. And I've been with people who had so little wrong, but they weren't willing to do it. And we couldn't make it work because they weren't willing to do anything. They weren't willing to do anything, to practice, to do anything on their own.
But you brought up a very hot topic when it comes to breaking up, and that's cheating. Can people get through the cheating? I personally believe if they're cheating physically, it's just physical cheating. But if they are emotionally attached, that is, to me, that would be real cheating. When, like you said, that woman fell in love with the other guy. How do people get through that? And is that something that can be gotten through?
Yeah, I think that, well, there's some myths about infidelity, first of all. It's very painful. It's a big one. Most people, when they get into a relationship, say there's one thing that I'll never, ever stand for. And if you cheat on me, it's over. And that's sort of a going in place. I have to say that I have seen some of the best marriages that I know come out of the worst messes if they're both willing to do the work. And so here are some things. There's a couple of myths we have about cheating that I think are pretty important. One is that an affair is a sign something's wrong with the marriage. That's not true. Every marriage has something wrong with it. You know, every marriage has its own set of tensions or issues, and people will rationalize an affair by saying you don't want sex or you're always critical, and that may be true. But what's really interesting is that a lot of people who have affairs rank their marriages as happy, or they say they don't want out of the relationship they're in. They just did it because it kind of came up. So, you know, the people have lots of reasons for cheating. Cravings for something new, a little extra, more. You know, we're a culture, we love more. The intensity of new experiences, novelty. That there are many reasons why people have affairs, but it's not necessarily that something's wrong with the relationship. Another myth about affairs is that somebody looks for it. And so a serial cheater will look for it. Mm. But for most people, they just occur passively because of proximity, because we deceive ourselves and say it won't hurt to go for a walk. Once you start lying about a relationship, even if it's having lunch with someone and you don't tell your partner, that's when you're in trouble. You've crossed the line. But the biggest myth is that an affair spells the end of a marriage. And over 50% of the couples I work with have gotten stronger after an affair. But they're the ones who reach out, of course. And some of the best marriages I know have come from those matches, because you can't just muddle along in a relationship after you've had an affair. You have to really clean it out. You've got to go to the depth of your psychological closet. You've got to deal with issues of forgiveness and betrayal and vulnerability and shame to the person who did it. And if you dig deep enough, you can come through those and really heal yourself into some new way of being.
That sounds wonderful. And now Linda, you had a front seat to observe one of the most famous couples of my generation, Kurt and Courtney. What did you think about their relationship?
Well, I'm not going to talk about that.
Oh, okay.
That's all bad for me. You know,
I'm sorry. That's okay. I had to.
Yeah, that's okay.
I saw that you made a comment that they got along great together, that they kind of connected very well. That's why I wanted to bring it up.
Well, I said that on the Huff Post. Yeah, you know, it's I didn't know their marriage, and I did. So I don't really want to comment on that. When I saw them, they got along well, but I'm not going to get. I can't.
Yeah, I know. I understand.
Ask her that. Yeah.
That's cool. That's cool. And now, let me ask you, what is the most important thing that a person can, a most important question to ask a person to whom you think you might want to commit yourself to?
The most important. Okay, so that's a very good question, and here's the answer is interesting. There's no question. There is no question to ask. There are things to observe. Because if you ask them a question, if you say, Do you believe in doing your own work? Who's going to say no? Do you believe in cheating, hitting, lying, not working? Who's going to say yes? I believe in those things. No one's going to say that. We live in a culture where we're swamped by all sorts of of thinking about relationships, and most people know that skills are important, et cetera, et cetera. So we all say the right thing. What you need to do is you need to know your own patterns. For some people, the more they fall in love, the more attracted they are to someone, the more they need to go in the direction of that person. For other people, they need to run like crazy. And when they feel themselves attracted, do not go there. Go the other way. It's not the questions you need to ask. What it is observing, what are their relationships like with other people, with their family? How do they talk about past lovers? How have they dealt with issues of trouble? And we all have had trouble in relationships, friends, siblings, parents. Do they blame other people or all the time? Do they blame other people or do they say, I had something to do with this? How are they in their integrity? Not with you, but with other people. Do they cheat at work? Because if they cheat at work, they're going to cheat with you. Just not in the beginning. So you need to do a lot of observing.
Yeah, I've always found it very interesting when someone ends up, like, let's say someone who fell in love with a married man or a married woman, and it's like, well, you're marrying a cheater. You're falling in love with a cheater. Don't you get the cycle here? But I'm assuming that's something to watch out for.
Well, it is, and I actually have been working with a couple who both were married when they fell in love, and then they ran off together. And guess what's happened? They are totally suspicious of each other all the time now. They're saying, well, you did it with me. Why aren't you going to do it with someone else? So isn't that interesting? So if you cheated to be with me, why won't you cheat with me to be with someone else? So that's a hard thing to work out. And again, I think, I don't know if it's again, but I really believe in therapy, not because I do it, but I think that if you have ongoing issues, then it's really a good idea to get some therapy or coaching that can help you manage those ongoing issues, because they're going to come up over and over again. And there's so much we can do.
I can't help but think about the idea, and there's so much of it out there. The whole idea of the soulmate, and people who romanticize this notion that this is who I am meant to be with, and I can only imagine the heartbreak that if it does not work out. What are your ideas of that? Is it just a nice, fancy, romantic notion, or do you feel that some people really are just meant to be together?
I think there's a lot of soulmates, whatever that is, that come in our life that are teachers. We're not necessarily meant to be with them forever. Some of the hardest people in our lives are often people who give us the biggest lessons. I think that the idea of the soulmate is somehow this idea that it's going to be a piece of cake. For me, I think that there are more than one people on the planet we can work out with. The more difficult we have. I don't think there's many people I could work out with but my husband, but I'm sure there are some others. But I think the idea of the soulmate is this idea you meet somebody and then you're swamped with all these love chemicals and you think, oh my God, we were together in Atlantis. We've been together in past lives. It's perfect. And off they go into the sunset and have their first power struggle and everything breaks down. I think that it's a scam. I think it sets people up. It sets people up with the idea that in fact relationships are hard work. It's like what you do in your work. You know that people hear you on the other end, on the radio, what you teach, what you advise, what you interview, and it all sounds wonderful. But you know what goes into what time you had to get up this morning, how you had to get to work, how some of the equipment didn't work, you had to get it to work, the person you were counting on to open up didn't show up. You had to read my book, and, your dog went away in the middle of it. I mean, there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes to make anything work. Mm-hmm. And to make a relationship work, that's true. And those initial feelings have nothing to do with whether it's going to work or not. Soulmate's a part of that, because I feel this connection to you. You're familiar to me. It's probably because you're like my mother. It's probably more true. And to really make it work needs something very different. A lot of schlepping goes into writing a book or running a radio program or having a good relationship. There's a lot of behind-the-scenes hard work that you have to have the skill and the willingness to do.
Well, you can say that again. And you bring up in your book how important it is to keep your own identity, and that seems to be, in my observation of friends, family, and whatnot, the first thing that's lost is the individual's identity in many cases. Why do you feel it's so important to keep your own identity to maintain a healthy relationship?
Because the more I have of me, the more I can bring to you. We're not two halves of a whole. We're each whole people. And my job in the world, before it is to learn to love you or to be a good partner for you, my job is to be there for me, because I'm the last person I'm going to see in this world when I leave. My life has to come from the inside. That's why it's all an inside job. Love is an inside job. Relationships are an inside job. The more there is of me, the more I have for you. The less there is of me, the less I have that I can give you. And so if I'm not in touch with myself, then what's going to happen is that you're going to feel the cost of that. If I'm not nurturing the garden of my own well-being, then who pays? My partner pays.
Mm-hmm.
So,
absolutely. And I know this is a big topic that people throw around, or a cliche that perhaps is thrown around, but it's something that many people talk to me about, that they feel they are codependent. What is your idea of unhealthy codependency, and is there a healthy version of codependency?
Well, I think it's a complicated word, because, the other side of codependency is the best thing we do for each other. The best thing we do for each other is support, nourish, and show up and back and have your back. So it becomes unhealthy. The intention is what makes it healthy or unhealthy to start with. If my intention is to do something for you to get you to love me, to realize how great I am, to know you can't live without me, that's a very different thing than if I'm there to do something to support you, not because I'm needing something for it, but because that's what good friends do for each other. So it has to do with intention. It has to do with the cost. It has to do with whether what I'm doing is I'm lying to your boss about you not being able to go to work because you were drunk the night before, which isn't good for either of us, or I'm supporting. I had a woman who taught me something about that once. She and her husband came in for counseling, and she was very clear. She had never been to a counselor in her life, and she never came back. She came one time with this guy. She said, I want to say this in front of a professional. And this is what she said. Her husband he had diabetes, he had heart problems, and he was a smoker and a drinker. And the doctor had said, if you don't stop doing these things, I can't help you. It's going to happen. You're going to have a heart attack. Your diabetes is going to get out of control. And this is what she said to him. It was just amazing. She was so clear. She'd probably never read a self-help book in her life. She said, if you get hit crossing the street by a car and you become a quadriplegic, I will take care of you until the day we die, because that's not anything you did. But if you have a heart attack or if your diabetes gets out of control, you can't count on me anymore. You're the one that's creating it, and I'm not going to sacrifice my life to look after you. She said, if you get a disease, it's not your fault. I'm in. But if you don't stop doing the things that are making this happen, I'm out. Now, that was a beautiful example of what you're asking me, because instead of fighting with him and, cooking him dinners and having him run off to McDonald's after, she said, okay, I'm here to back you. If it happens without your creating it, but if you create it, you're not going to bring me down too. I was just sort of blown away. I thought, wow, this person really has it together.
Very healthy.
Wasn't that good?
Very healthy way of looking at the relationship. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And Linda, let's talk about what the most important ingredient is to a long-time successful relationship. You had mentioned doing the work. Is there any other one thing that we really need to work on in order to keep it successful in a long time?
Know yourself. Number one, know yourself. Know where your proclivities are. If you're attracted to bad boys or runaway brides, know that about yourself so that you're not going to recreate that. If you think you can save somebody, and that's your big thing, you're going to find somebody who's got a lot of trouble, but you're going to fix them with love instead of run the other way. I think that knowing where I'm not generous or where I withhold or where am I trouble, that's the second thing is understanding that for me, I have a lot of anxiety, and it often will come out as criticism with my partner. I know that about myself, and I work really hard on that. But that's a nasty thing that can come up and get in my way. And if you're very defensive, we all have these things that we do, not because we're bad, just because we're human, but know what they are. Know what they are, and know that work starts inside of you. Generosity in every part of ourselves. Giving your partner the benefit of the doubt, not so that you're done with it, but but really, we have to forgive all the time. It's not just the big things; it's the little things. That's another really important quality. How willing are you to be in it? And if you want to be in it, and you have trouble in relationships, are you willing to do the work to find out how to do it differently? So those are some of the things, and all that's in love cycles.
Very good, very good. And one last question, because I say this personally because I have an acquaintance, a neighbor, who is going through what she is now starting to understand to be a verbally abusive relationship, and it seems to me that many people have this idea that if they're not hitting me, it's not abuse. What is it that, let's say, a friend or neighbor like myself could do to help them along, or to help them self-empower themselves, to not allow the verbal abuse within their lives, to take a stand? And for anyone who's listening that is allowing themselves to be in a verbally abusive relationship, what is your advice to them?
Well, I guess the first question is, are they willing to look at it, or are they hooked into staying in that relationship? Because you can't talk somebody into leaving a relationship,
right,
unless they're ready. But I think that there's some good books out on verbal abuse, that it is everywhere, is dangerous and bad. And it may not hurt you physically, but it really hurts you emotionally, and that creates a lot of pain in our body, a lot of damage in our body. So, abuse, yes, it is. And if a person is just complaining about it all the time, that's not very healthy for them either. And you might want to put a boundary up and say, this is painful for me to hear you talk about, because I see it as abuse, and I don't see you doing anything differently. So if you need to be in a relationship, I can tell you you should leave, but I can't hear these things that he says to you anymore because they hurt my heart.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's wonderful. And as far as other people that, like I said, the second half of the question, is there a way to tell when you are in a verbally abusive relationship, or is it just that they're in a bad mood? That's something that people don't really bring up that much about. We have this big idea about domestic violence, but we never talk about emotional violence.
Well, I think that it's a very big thing. A lot of people take their moods out on each other. Someone who is depressed, for instance, often shows his anger. And if you are with someone who blames you for what goes wrong in their life, that's a real danger sign. Are you willing to be blamed? And that means, again, if you're in the relationship, that means a conversation. But you have to be careful what you say to people, because sometimes people don't want to hear it. So, you know, I would always start by saying, I have some discomfort about some of the things I see in your relationship. It may even be about me, but I just want to say it. Would you like the feedback? And so I'd always start by asking, do you want the feedback? Because sometimes they say no. Then you decide if you want to keep being friends with that person, whether you can handle it. And sometimes we can't.
Yeah, and that's a shame. We all have to, what do they say? We all have to follow our heart and follow our spirit and do the best that we can, actually. Linda,
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about these workshops that you're doing at Rancho La Puerta. Are you going to be doing any one soon?
Well, I go to Rancho La Puerta, which is the top destination health spa in the world, actually, right over the border in Tecate, Mexico, and I give talks. I do workshops in Oregon, Corvallis, Oregon. You can find them on my website, lovecycles.org, or lindaacarroll.com. Anyone can get my book anywhere, Amazon bookstores. And I also work with couples all over the United States, and I go into their town, work with them for a couple of days, and all that's on my website. So you can find me through my website.
Oh, that's wonderful. And again, you can find more information about Linda Carroll at www.lindaacarroll.com. That's 2 R's and 2 L's. By the way, I had to do that a couple of times to remember.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And, well, anyway, thank you so much for joining us today, Linda. I'm so glad we had the opportunity.
to talk to you.
It was very nice.
Thank you
so much. You have a wonderful day now. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And for everybody else, I just want to let you know that next week we will be here. I will be doing my monthly consciousness talk, and this month's talk will be 8 ways to enhance your awakening. So join me here at the Pyramid One Network next Tuesday at 2 p.m. Have a wonderful week, everybody. We love you. Bye-bye.